But of course, we have Mr. Stephen, yeah, man, the man who, he has been on the trod with Bob and done many interviews. If you just go YouTube and Google, you will see all of these interviews. So welcome, sir.
Oh, it's a delight to be back here. I had such a good time with you the other day, and lots of laughs. And I brought a whole heap of music with me today from all over the world, both Marley covers and some other interesting things. So if you want to just swing for the next 2 hours, I got plenty of stuff to share.
Yeah, man. But Mr. Stephen, is there
there's an S on my name.
Stephens.
That's right.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Right? Mr. Stephen,
listen, wait. If we're going to be together for 2 hours, you got to call me Roger.
Okay.
Or call me what Bob Marley called me.
What's that?
Roja.
Okay.
And this is a Jamaican show, so let's be Roja.
Yeah, man. It's just a politeness in me. That is me. When I say elders, it's just automatically I'm going to put on the Mr. or the Miss or the Mrs. That's just me all over.
I'm a very reluctant elder, let me tell you.
Okay, Roger. Okay, so I'm going to program myself to say, okay, Roger.
Roja.
Okay. Now, we know I'm normally at 4:13, but we are 3 minutes away, but it's not a problem. We usually share a thought with the audience. I don't know if there's a thought from Bob Marley.
From Bob Marley.
Yeah, man, from the Bob Marley repertoire, because he has said a whole lot of things, and a whole lot of things that you have captured in interviews with him. So I don't know if you want us to go for a break.
Life is one big road with lots of signs, so while you're riding through the ruts, don't you complicate your mind.
That's true.
In other words, the truth is simple, and it's so simple it's eloquent. But I have something of wisdom I'd like to share with you.
Yeah, sure.
I spent a lot of time in Vietnam during the war working with refugees.
Okay.
And I met Taoists. The yin-yang symbol, the balance of nature, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of water and a great deal of land and vice versa. He who desires nothing has everything. The less you want, the more you have. Well, it's wonderful that we're celebrating still the 70th birthday of the prophet Bob Marley, and his music not only changed my life, but the life of a lot of the listeners out there, I am sure. I do a show called The Life of Bob Marley all over the world. I show 2 hours of unreleased footage and tell his life story in between the clips, and I have a constant stream of photographs behind me when I speak, many of which I took when I was on the road with him for 2 weeks on the Survival Tour in November of '79. And it always strikes me, Troy, when I do a show, almost always at least one person comes up to me at the end of it and says, Mr. Steffens, I know you're not going to think I'm crazy when I tell you this, but I've got to say this. Bob Marley's music literally saved my life. I don't think they say that about Lady Gaga or New Skids on the Blocks, Bob Marley's music means something. There's no dibby lyrics there.
Yeah.
Everything is well thought out, and it is designed to be a succinct statement of how he understands the world, and in so doing he enlightens all of us with that knowledge. And I talk often about how he described the absolute horrors of capitalism in a couplet. Good God, this illiteracy.
No, I have a question.
Well, wait a minute. Let me give you the
sure.
couplet. He said, good God, this illiteracy is just machined to make money. In other words, you keep people ignorant.
Yeah, that's true.
Not stupid, because people aren't stupid. But you can keep them unlearned, keep them ignorant, and then you can pay them 17 cents an hour to make Nike in Indonesia. And Bob knew that was one of the evil effects of the capitalist system.
That's true.
I wanted to say a different word for system, but I
yeah, man, I know the Peter Tosh one. The Peter Tosh one. Yeah.
Just add the age to it.
Yeah, man. No. I want to ask you this: is that I read a lot, right? Especially culture, because that's what I major in right now, and. Marcus Garvey, people look at Marcus Garvey as a prophet, and a lot of persons cling to Marcus Garvey, and a lot of what he said they look at Marcus Garvey as a prophet. But I always say to people that Marcus Garvey was traveling. He was even there in the Panama Canal when it was being built, and he traveled all over. So he was really exposed and saw what was actually coming on stream. So even when he talked about his imperial majesty and the crowning of a black king, right? It wasn't something that he went to his bed, and had a dream about, He saw that thing coming. Now, what I want to ask you is that, in terms of Bob, a lot of the narrative and the advocacy and the social commentary, both local and international, at that time we never have cable television in Jamaica, right? So how, from your experience with him, how did he capture a lot of this narrative and news? Because a lot of what he's saying inside here, even talking about Zimbabwe and nuclear power and all of these things, how did he capture all of this to actually story tell it and narrate it within his music?
That's a very good question, Troy, and it has to go back to 1966. But first of all, Jamaicans are very educated people, and you always had that British influence. You had BBC News and things true. Like that. But in 1966, 4 years after Bob's mother married Mr. Booker in Delaware, Bob went to see her for about 8 months. Probably, and this was one of my topics the other night, when did he actually leave? Let's say Rita Marley is correct, and he left on February 11th, 66, came back in October of that year. So he was in America at the height of the Black Power movement, the riots in the streets. 1966 was a violent, fraught year in the United States of America, and he was in Delaware, he was near Philly, he was near Washington, he went to New York. He heard that, he read the Black Power literature. He had a couple of friends who had a kind of African-American gift shop across the street from where he stayed with his mother, Ibis Pitts and Dion Wilson. They talked to him about the Black Power movement. He was familiar at that early stage with Angela Davis. Then he came back again in the summer of '69. Actually, Bob Marley made a bunch of hippie jewelry to sell at Woodstock. Did you know that?
No.
That was the same year, that Woodstock summer of August '69. That same summer he told, Ibis and Dion were talking to him, and they said, boy, you're going to be a big star, you're going to make lots of money, have a nice long life, and everybody will know you and stuff. And Bob said, no, he says, when I'm 36, I'm going to die.
What? Wow.
Now,
so he predicted his death.
When he was a kid at 24. Now, that's an odd thing for a young man to even be thinking about, let alone say, and that's exactly what happened. So, now I'm going to tell you some things that probably very, very few people know about, because I've been researching this for 42 years. There was a woman here in Jamaica named Dr. Gail McGarity, and she had a fascinating background. She studied for a long time in England. She knew a lot of the Black Power people there and African people who went on to become leaders in their own country. She was exposed to the highest levels of intellectual thought. She probably was leaning toward Marxism, as a lot of progressive thinkers were then, even Mr. Manley. Mm-hmm. And she kind of recognized in Bob from the time of Catch a Fire forward that here was a person whose voice was going to be heard, and she wanted him to have an understanding of how the politics of the world worked. And she basically tutored him for quite some time in political theory and political thought, and exposed him to the kind of books that he needed to be reading. And Bob read a lot, not just the Bible.
That's obvious.
So to answer your question, Bob was always looking for a reasoning that he could pass along to the people because they were hearing his message, and he wanted to be able to say it in a simple way. I had a dear friend for many years who was a poet from Big Sur.
One sec, Roger, we have to go for the break. So hold that point and let's go for the break. It's the Entertainment Trail, and we're talking to Roger Steffens.
What we were talking about before the break, I wanted to make a mention of the fact that Bob truly, in my opinion, was a prophet, but it depends on how you define prophet. I had a very dear friend who lived in Big Sur. He was a poet named Rick Maston, and he said a prophet is someone who listens to what everyone around him is saying and states it back to himself in a simple way so he can understand it better, and in so doing enlightens all of us to our situation. And that is a good description of who Bob Marley was and what he accomplished. Yeah.
Now, looking at, for example, I was reading this. I think I don't remember if it's a book or an article or something online, where they were talking about the Berlin Wall, and when the Berlin Wall was coming down, there was a particular Bob Marley song that the people were actually singing when the Berlin Wall. You know of that?
I don't know what song it was. It doesn't surprise me at all.
I don't remember. It was One Love?
It was One Love, yeah.
It was One Love.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that at that point in time, you know, from your experience capturing Bob Marley, you know, how did Bob Marley at that time, when we didn't have much telecommunications and all of these things, how did he make connection with these markets for bookings and all of these things? And because he seemed to have had some way of networking with the international market.
Well, that began in 1968 when he was discovered at a Ground Nation by Johnny Nash. And he and his partner, Danny Sims, used to come down to Jamaica quite often. Danny had relatives here. Danny was related to Neville Willoughby.
Okay.
And they heard him and Peter and Rita singing at a Ground Nation on Ethiopian Christmas at the beginning of 68. And Johnny just thought he had one of the greatest voices and some of the greatest compositions he'd ever heard. So they signed him to the JAD label, J-A-D, Johnny Nash. Arthur Jenkins, their producer, and Danny Sims. That's what JAD came from.
Yeah.
And Johnny brought Bob to Sweden in 71 to write songs for a movie he was making there. Bob had a lot of exposure. I mean, coming to the States in 66 and 69 and early 70s and going to Sweden for months, then going to England right after that. He was aware of everything going around. He watched television, he watched the news, he read newspapers, and Johnny Nash was grooming Bob not only as a composer for him to have hits with, but also as an artist himself. But Bob's music sounded so strange to the foreign ear at that time that they could never get any airplay on him, and eventually, even though he had signed him briefly to CBS in 72 to Columbia, they released a stupid record called Reggae on Broadway. If they'd called it Reggae on High Street, it might have been a hit in England.
Okay.
But it was, you know, dibby music compared to what he was making the years before for Lee Perry. So by the time Chris Blackwell signed him, he was a well-groomed artist. And I want to go back to the very beginning because there is some story that rarely gets told properly, and it is the influence of Joe Higgs on Bob Marley and the Wailers' early years. A mutual friend of theirs named Errol brought Bob Marley to Joe, who had already been making hit records with his partner Eddie, and not Eddie, Joe and... oh God, why am I blanking? But Higgs and Wilson, Roy Wilson.
Okay.
Not Delroy Wilson, Roy Wilson.
Yeah.
And so for about a 4-year period, Joe Higgs was tutoring Bob Marley in everything: mic technique, composition, stagecraft, poetry, and that was the basic training that made him into an international artist. And then when Johnny Nash came aboard, he was already an enormous star in the world. He brought him to the next level he needed to be by bringing him on the road with him. And Bob might only sing 1 or 2 songs at the beginning of Johnny Nash's shows, but it was exposing him to foreign audiences, white audiences that he'd never been exposed to before that. So by the time in, I guess, August of 72, when Chris Blackwell signed him to Island Records, Bob was fully formed. Bob was ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's something phenomenal that, you know, he went through, because a lot of persons in Jamaica will have, you know, you talk about Bob Marley and you talk about record production, the name that comes up is Island Record, Chris Blackwell, but, you know, persons might not know the influence of the Roy Wilson and the Johnny Nash, you know, these persons on his career.
Oh, Johnny's influence is enormous.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the great sorrow for me in my forthcoming book, which I've really been working on for 36 years. And I read excerpts publicly for the first time as the Bob Marley lecture the other night. Johnny Nash refuses to be interviewed.
Okay.
I think he got so burned out by Danny Sims, his partner, who was a mafioso, and freely admitted it. remember when I was doing the complete Wailers box sets, I asked him if he could get me something, and he laughed. He says, "I could get you anything. I'm a mobster."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, enough said with that.
But the other thing is that I realize that even in the current crop of reggae artists who are coming up or aspiring, they have this concept of the guitar. And even when you look at, like for example, a Reggae Sumfest, the trademark, that that logo, it's Bob with that hand up in the air.
No, not Sumfest, Sunsplash.
Sunsplash, yeah, Sunsplash. And you find out that that particular symbol with Bob on the guitar is used immensely to represent reggae.
Yeah.
Now, who taught Bob? I don't know if you know who taught Bob how to play the guitar. Was he self-taught?
They shared a guitar among them in the early years, and Bunny would have it for a few days, and then Bob would have it. And
okay.
Peter gave him some training, and Peter often said, "I taught Bob everything he knew," which is a gross exaggeration. But he did have an influence, because when he came to town from Sav, he was the only person they knew who had his own guitar, so they asked him to come.
That was Bob, who has his own guitar.
No, Peter.
Peter Tosh had his own guitar.
Peter made his first guitar when he was a little boy out of a sardine pan and some wire.
Oh.
Yeah, and watched a man in Sav who knew how to play, and by watching the man, he taught himself chords.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Peter was incredibly musical. He was playing on Johnny Nash sessions in New York in the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it. And Bob became very proficient in later years on the guitar. We don't understand that he really was a very fine guitarist by the end of his life.
Okay. Now, looking at Bob through the lens of, say, for example, at the time, because somebody said that Chris Blackwell actually shelved Jimmy Cliff to promote Bob. Is there any truth in that?
No, Jimmy left Blackwell after The Harder They Come, and so he was looking around for somebody else he could turn into a star, because he was very upset that Jimmy was leaving for a bigger label.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And Jimmy could have been, bigger than Bob if he hadn't done two things. If he hadn't started recording kind of popish music and revealed that he was a Muslim. Because everybody saw him in the movie and they thought, oh, he must be a Rastafarian.
Yeah.
But he kind of abjured Rasta in those days, and now he doesn't profess Muslim either. He's more like a universalist, and
Okay, I didn't know. So Jimmy was aligned with the Muslim faith.
Yeah, of course.
And which conflicted with identities that people had preconceived about him. Images.
Talking about images.
Images. That's true.
So Bob stepped into that gap and took it as far as anybody ever took it before.
Now, you said in terms of Bob, Jimmy Cliff going into the type of pop style music. Yeah. But look at Bob now. Wasn't that one of the problems when the Wailers got dismantled in terms of Bunny and Peter, where they thought that Bob was, getting too involved with Chris Blackwell, and Chris Blackwell was really making the music more appealing to the international audience?
I don't see it that way.
But that's one theory.
Oh, I know. I talked about it in my speech the other night. You have Bunny. Well, let me tell you a story. When they signed with Blackwell, they signed for 2 albums. And after Catch a Fire came out, Chris wanted them to come back to England to record the second album. And when they weren't working in the studios, they were doing one-night stands. And he told them that he would fund all their expenses during that touring time. And at the end of the tour, when they delivered the Burnin' album I guess it must have been around April of '73, he gave them a bill that he said they owed him for £40,000, which was about 80,000 US. And then he brought them together and said, now we're going to start touring you in the States, and we're going to play freak clubs. And Bunny said, what do you mean by freak clubs? And Chris, according to Bunny, Chris said, well, where gay people come, where guys and guys come, and women who like women come, and right now you're nobody, and we want to make you into something. And Bunny said, well, a body is a debtor. and I'm nobody. So if that's what you think we're going to do, I'm not going to be part of it. I'm leaving. And that left Peter and Bob and Joe Higgs replacing Bunny to do the tour in the fall of that year. And finally, you know, Peter, with so many great songs that he'd written, not getting them on the album, and Bob getting the bulk of the material on the album, he decided that it was time for him to become a soloist too. And I got to be honest with you, I was really angry at Blackwell for a long time, because he almost seemed to take pride in the fact that he broke the group up. But listen, if they had stayed together, we never would have had Black Art Man album. We never would have had the Equal Rights album.
Yeah.
In effect, we got triple the amount of music from three giants who were all capable of being lead singers and composers. So you have to be objective now from this long period later and see what really happened then. Ibo asked Bob why he quit the Wailers and in 73 and
that's Ibo Cooper?
Ibo, I'm sorry, yes. And he told Ibo, what makes you think I left? What makes you think they didn't leave me?
But I was listening to Copeland Forbes yesterday, and he said, I don't remember, but he said that before you had Bob Marley and the Wailers, you had like 2 other names before that.
No, and I talked about that in my speech too. Interesting story about how they got their name. According to Bunny, you know, they were thinking.
Take us from the beginning forward.
You are in the beginning with this story. They were sitting around not long before they recorded Simmer Down, and they were trying to decide on names. They talked, maybe we should be the Teenagers, maybe we should be the Roosters.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Bob Marley and the Roosters? And they're all sitting in trench, and all of a sudden they hear a voice through the wall. The Wailers! The Wailers, Bunny said. The Wailers. The Wailers. The Wailers. And he said that means we're suffering, and who knows more about suffering than we. And so they decided to call themselves the Wailers. But as Bunny says, no man can say he is the one who call us the Wailers, whether it's Ricardo, Scott, or other people who go around saying they named the group. So that's my answer to that one.
Okay.
You're asking some good questions. I like this.
Now, you spoke about how the group got dismantled, you know, because of the Chris Blackwell influence. But
and you were talking about, is it because it was too pop?
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, they're trying to reach an international audience. And Bob heard the 2 Americans who overdubbed the Catch a Fire sessions, and he liked it. So did Peter. This gives us a little bit. We've never had a studio this good available to us before. This is great. And I don't think it was because they were maturing the sound. And then Bob, when he had his own productions, beginning with Natty Dread forward, always gave it an international style sound, and that's what brought him to tremendous worldwide fame. So you can't argue that Bob was abandoning roots or anything because of that.
Well, when I listen to Talking Blues, and that is one of my favorite albums.
With the talk.
With the Talking Blues.
Yeah, man.
And he was talking about that, you know, he was talking about the group and saying that Peter and Bunny said them not tour, and him can understand that, but it's like he was saying on the same album that they were going off saying things and nobody is saying nothing to him, you know, and he seemed to be very upset when you were listening to Talking Blues.
That is a 1975 interview.
Yeah,
that's very close to the hurt, because they had one goal among them, and that was to make enough money through their own productions that they could buy a house and build a studio in it, so that whenever the inspiration hit them day or night, they could go right into the studio and cut those tracks. And that's what they were always working toward, and they never got enough money in front of them to be able to create that. And then when they finally got on island, they were starting to make real money, despite the bill for 40 grand. It was within reach now, and they broke up. And I think that broke Bob's heart.
But how was that bill settled?
You have to ask them. I'm sure Blackwell found a way to get the money out of them.
Okay.
Let us talk about the internationalization of the music now. I have a very special track, and I'm not going to say anything at all about this track, but I want you to see if you can identify what song this is. It's one of Bob Marley's most famous songs, and see how fast you as a listener can pick up on what it is.
Okay. Yep. Now, for those of you who joined in late, and let me keep repeating, we are talking with Roger Steffens, and he's somebody who has, toured with Bob Marley, interviewed Bob Marley, documented a lot of Bob Marley when he was alive, had intimate conversations with him, and he has a wealth of music that he's sharing with us today, that these are unreleased tracks, unreleased beats, and one of which you were just listening to, where it's very seminal, to Exodus. Okay, now we are back with Roger, and we're talking about it.
Well, let's identify that first.
Yes.
That's one of the weirdest Marley covers I've ever encountered in my life, and it shows his deep international influence. If you didn't figure it out yet, it's Exodus.
Yes.
And it's from Mongolia, where they have a form of singing that takes more than 20 years to understand and develop, called throat singing.
Okay.
Where you make not one, not two, but three separate tones at once while you are singing. And that man's name is Albert Kuvezin, and his group is called Yatka, and they did tour Europe several times, and that song actually did get released. So Exodus in its Mongolian incarnation.
Wow.
What did you think?
No, I think it was phenomenal. I think it was phenomenal, because at first I'm saying, where I couldn't locate any Bob Marley song until afterwards in the middle, when the words were coming out. Exodus, and then I realized it was Exodus, right? And it's one of my songs, and think normally when I'm traveling and I'm leaving anywhere, I usually say to anybody I'm leaving, say, what, see you, Exodus, movement of your people.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. And even in Jamaica, even sometimes I'm at home and I'm trying to hurry along, I'll normally say, movement of your people, Exodus.
It's funny how some people mishear that song, and they think he's singing Taxi Bus Movement of People. I have a little bit in my Marley show where I talk about how kids mishear Bob Marley songs. With a roof rack over our head.
Yeah.
Pajamas. I want pajamas with you. Pajamas. My son used to sing Set the Cactus Free. And then there was a Swedish guy who came to my house to see the archives once, and he says, well, Bob Marley wrote a Scandinavian song. I said, really? Which one was that? And he says, I'll never forget Norway, how they sold Marcus Garvey for rice.
And yes, we are having a lovely time. One thing with Bob, one time somebody asked Bob to define reggae music, and he said, boy, the only thing me can tell you, it have a skanking feel, and this is what you're feeling, the vibration, the skanking feel, right, Roger?
The beat of reggae is the beat of the healthy human heart at rest. And when Keith Richards came to my house to make a film about his album with Justin Hines, Wingless Angels, I mentioned that to him, and he said, yes, but they play slightly under. He said, I think the human heartbeat is 72 beats per minute, but the Rasta play it at 71. I don't know whether he sat there with his stopwatch.
But isn't that coming from Bingy, where they do the 1-2?
Bingy, of course.
Bingy music.
Has to be.
Now, back to what we were saying, Roger, about the internationalization of Bob Marley, and we want you to give us a perspective on that.
Well, it's fascinating because I have a hand-painted beaded curtain from Saigon of Chinese Bob. His face is bright yellow. He's got Chinese eyes and long Mandarin fingernails. And I have a Campesino t-shirt from southern Mexico where he has this brown face and much broader face than he had in real life. People love, like they do with Jesus, to see Bob in their own imagery, and that's fine, because he is a universal figure. Can we get back to some music?
Yeah, sure. Let's play some music.
Internationalization of reggae. There is probably nowhere outside of Jamaica where reggae music is bigger than the islands of Hawaii. They have 2 stations that play nothing but reggae music.
Okay.
And for a while they were calling it Jawaiian, but they don't like that term anymore. They call it Hawaiian reggae. And there were two virtuosi on the ukulele, that little tiny instrument, who got together and called themselves the Ka'au Crater Boys. And they did an offbeat but extraordinary version of my favorite song by Bob Marley, and that is Waiting in Vain.
Okay, we're going to hear it right now.
Go there, Probo.
I don't wanna wait in vain for love. I don't wanna wait in vain for love. From the very first time I placed my eyes on you, girl, my heart says follow. But I know now that I'm way down on your line, and the waiting feeling's fine. So don't treat me like a puppet on a string, 'cause I know I can do my thing. Don't talk to me as if you think I'm dumb. I wanna know when you're gonna come. You see, I don't wanna wait in vain for your love. I don't wanna wait in vain for your love. It's been 3 years since I'm knocking on your doors, and I still can knock some more. Ooh girl, is it feasible? I wanna know now. Oh, I to knock some more. Yeah, see, in life I know there's lots of grief, but your love is my relief. Tears in my eyes burn, tears in my eyes burn, while I'm waiting for my turn. You see, I don't wanna wait in vain for your love. Ooh yeah, I don't wanna wait in vain for your love. On your doors, and I still can knock some more. Ooh girl, is it feasible? I wanna know now. Oh, I to knock some more. Yeah, see, in life I know there's lots of grief, but your love is my relief. Tears in my eyes burn, tears in my eyes burn, while I'm waiting for my turn. You see, I don't wanna wait in vain for your love. Ooh yeah, I don't wanna wait in vain for your love.
Welcome back, everybody.
What do you think of that one?
Boy, it fits right there in Hawaii. Some nice island music, give you a nice island vibe.
Yeah.
The instruments is just soothing, you know. I could listen to that every day after I come in from work.
Now, it's not typical of Hawaiian reggae. I mean, that's a unique song by two of the virtuosi of that ukulele instrument there.
Yeah.
I think it's only 4 strings, if I'm not mistaken. But you hear the sounds that get out of that.
I love it. And that's what we're hearing, which we would think of as a guitar, it's a ukulele.
Yeah, a tiny thing, maybe a foot long.
Yeah, I know the instrument.
Yeah.
I know the instrument. But it's really a cool, you know, real cool,
Well, they're an
soothing.
island culture, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. You know, it's not as hard as the reggae that we are used to in Jamaica.
Oh,
you
no.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
that's not even reggae. That's a whole different thing. But
Yeah.
based on a fantastic love song that Linton Kwesi Johnson says is the most beautiful love song ever written.
But I have a hard question for you now, Roger.
Oh, good.
Right?
Yeah, man.
I've read Wait the Town Tell the People, right?
Oh, Norman Stolz.
Yeah, Stolz.
Very good book.
That's right. I've read that book. Actually, I own a copy of it for myself. But you know, he's not sure. You know, reading the book where the name reggae came from, because he was saying it was based on a song that was called "Do the Reggae," but which was, I think, spelled REGGAY, something like
Toots.
that. Yeah.
I don't think we will ever know where the name came from. Every year for 16 years, I played New York City on Bob's birthday. It was sponsored by a club called SOBs, Sounds of Brazil, and when we had a bigger lineup with Bob's Mother or Sugar Mine out of people, we would play the Ritz or Irving Plaza. And one night, a guy came to the show at SOBs who told me he was raised in Trenchtown with Bob, and his name is Ricardo Scott. And he told me that in 1962, he invented the word reggae. And he said it's because he studied Latin in high school, and because it was kind of street music, and also music that gave praise to the king. He combined the two, the word stregge, with the word rex regis, meaning king in Latin, and came up with reggae. And my question is, why did it take 6 years to catch on if he invented it in 1962 and it was around the beginning of 68 that Toots did do the reggae? We will never, ever know who created the term. Not for sure. As I say in my lectures, there are no facts in Jamaica, only versions.
That's true, because you know how. But the other thing is that in terms of Bob, looking at Bob, you know, Bob in his later years, he acquired a lot of assets, right? And we couldn't look at Bob as the Trenchtown Bob anymore, you know, because Bob was moving in the middle classes. You know, he could actually align himself with, you know, and that was a big part of why some persons speculate why he got shot up by his Hope Road home, because they didn't want him up there. They didn't want a Rasta man in their community, you know, and to compound the issue, Rasta man get them beauty queen pregnant, the Browning pregnant, because there's this Browning complex in the society. You know, Butcher talk about him Browning. Okay, now, do you think in the latter years, you know, persons were really reading Bob for who he is? Because Bob I've listened to interviews with Bob, and Bob said, you know, pretty much what he was saying, any chance him get, him going to take it, because when Ziggy ready for go to school, him can't tell Ziggy say him get a chance and never take it. Right?
I got a Ziggy story. Was it St. George's he went to?
I don't remember, but I know I think David Marley or one of the Marleys, I went to St. George's with him.
Yeah, that's Ziggy.
Yeah.
So one day this old Monsignor stops Ziggy in the hall and says, "So, Mr. Marley, you have come here to find out the truth." And Ziggy Screwfaces the Jesuit says, "Oh, what truth that?" All right, let's talk about the Uptown claim about Bob Marley. I think he'd be screaming if anybody ever said that to him. Bob lived for other people. He said that all the time, and
That's true.
Didn't just say it, he lived it. He never owned a house of his own. He bought places for other people. Tough Gong was really like an office building and a place where people could crash, and he brought the ghetto uptown, according to Neville Garrick. Bob Marley used his money to help people. He probably bought dozens of houses. He bought a farm for his lawyer. He bought houses for his band members, for his baby mothers, for other relatives, for people who needed a help. And he gave away almost all the money he made. And he didn't even have a real bed in his life until about 18 months before he passed away, when some of the women in his life got together and bought him a bed to put up in the attic there in Tuffgong, where he was sleeping on a cot. And when I asked Bob, how do you think of yourself? What are you? And he said, I'm a farmer.
Okay.
He was a 9-mile boy all his life. He was a farmer. He understood the rhythms of nature. And he was truly just as happy sleeping with that rock stone for a pillow on the ground and watching Jaws firmament over him as he would be in the Hilton Hotel or the Waldorf Astoria.
So this was not fictional poetry. This was actually real.
Everything he wrote was real.
Okay.
I mean, I have a tape of him where he's talking about our duty is to build a BC studio in Africa.
Okay.
Have hit after BC hit, and then we number one, and then we laugh.
Okay.
That was his real goal in life.
So the Hope Road home where the museum is today,
yeah,
he owned that.
Well, he owned it, sure, but look at all the people who were hanging out there. And Brother Georgie to this day lives behind in the place that Bob provided for him.
Okay.
You know, this was a center. It was a studio. It was a workplace. It was an office. And Bob shared it with lots of different people.
That's true. I've seen videos of him playing football in the front yard with a whole lot of people just hanging out and thing, you know.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and I can imagine his neighbors were upset about that.
Colin Leslie, the managing director of the Tuffgong Group of Companies when Bob was alive, is one of my dearest friends, and he had to sign a lot of the checks that Bob wrote. So he really knew how Bob spent his money, and there's a documentary film in which Chris Blackwell says, I think Bob, was responsible for supporting about 4,000 people. Well, in fact, according to Colin, it was a heck of a lot more when you consider him giving money to one person who might have had 5 or 6 kids, and he was supporting them too. So Bob was the essence of generosity. He didn't drive a $350,000 car. He went on stage in the clothes he was wearing in the daytime. He was not a show-off in any way, and he says, my life isn't worth anything unless I can help my people. And
that's true.
That was such a tremendous example, and should
That's
remain
true.
an example. When you consider, the hip-hop stars and their billions of dollars, what are they doing for the community?
That's true.
Bob did everything he possibly could for the community. I want to give you a quote about Bob that I always like to share because I think it's so right on. In 1996, the New York Times Sunday magazine celebrated its 100th anniversary of publication, and they asked each of their critics to choose one work of art in their fields that they thought would last 100 years into the future. And John Pirellis, who is so eloquent, the chief pop critic, said, chose Burnin', the last album of Funny Bob and Peter, and he said, Bob Marley became the voice of third world pain and resistance, the sufferer in the concrete jungle who would not be denied forever. Outsiders everywhere heard him as their champion. If he could make himself heard, so could they, without compromise. In 2096, when the former third world has overrun and colonized the former superpowers, Bob Marley will be commemorated as a saint. I agree with
that's
that.
so soulful. That's the
Isn't that beautiful?
That's true. Any closing remarks for us, Roger?
No matter what you do it to a reggae soundtrack, because it is the sound of the music that elevates the spirit. Reggae is a vibration, and the universe is vibration. And in the ancient times, the greatest prophets were also the greatest musicians. And in our time, the greatest musician was Bob Marley, and he was truly a prophet, and he was truly the greatest musical artist of the 20th century. The New York Times said that he was the most influential musician of the second half of the 20th century. The first half, they said, was Louis Armstrong, and both of them were daily herb smokers.
Okay. No, and that's from Roger Steffens. Of course, I'm sure.
No, that's from the New York Times.
Yeah.